Hi, I'm Mandy Fitzsimmons. I'm your Washington REALTORS Legal Hotline lawyer. In this video, I want to address some questions that I've received from brokers who recently read an article in the RE magazine, the spring 2024 edition. It is a legal hotline article. It's entitled Agents Add and Forms Multiply. And the article gives more detailed instruction about what we're going to talk about, but I want to kind of give you a broad view of what the issues were, because it seems to be new information that is news to some folks, and it shouldn't be. You should all be doing this, and you should all have been doing this for quite some time. Here's the issue. It is a requirement of state law that when you write a purchase and sale agreement, the purchase and sale agreement includes an agency disclosure provision, and the agency disclosure provision is intended to put everybody who's a party to this transaction on notice of who the agents are in the transaction and who those agents represent. So what we are seeing more and more with our team structures and legal assistants, licensed folks who will call themselves transaction coordinators, the more we see the involvement of these players in transactions, the more this issue becomes an issue. And here is the issue. When an agent, so we're talking about somebody who has a real estate license, if you have an unlicensed assistant, they are not involved in any way in what I'm about to say. Anytime you have a licensed real estate broker who is participating in a transaction, so this may be a team member of yours who showed the property to the buyer, and the buyer then ends up purchasing that property. The only role they played was to show the property to the buyer, but the buyer ends up purchasing that property. It could be after mutual acceptance, you have a licensed assistant who now handles all of the negotiations related to the inspection contingency, drafts the Form 35R, handles the negotiations with the seller and the listing broker. Whatever role these additional licensed individuals play in the transaction has to be accounted for in the agency disclosure paragraph. And so brokers, if you have that team member who showed the property, you need to name them in the agency disclosure provision. If you have a licensed assistant who you know is going to be providing licensed services that require a license to your client in this transaction, you must account for them in the agency disclosure provision. And you're going to do two things. You're going to accomplish two outcomes when you do that. Number one, you're going to comply with the law. Yay. Number two, you're also going to let the broker on the other side of the transaction know that this agent is an agent in the transaction. A frustration that I hear sometimes from brokers is that the broker on the other side of the transaction expects me to communicate with their assistant. I don't know who their assistant is. They're not named in the transaction, so I can't deliver. This is the broker who's got the frustration saying, I can't deliver a notice to this assistant and make it an effective delivery because they are not named as an agent or a broker in the transaction. So delivering a notice to the assistant doesn't constitute delivery under the purchase and sale agreement. So even if I do deliver to that assistant, I also have to still deliver to the broker. And sometimes that frustrates the broker who says, send stuff to the assistant. So if you name your licensed assistant as an agent in the transaction, you comply with Washington law, and you also break down those barriers of communication between you and the broker on the other side of the transaction when you have this expectation that the other broker should be communicating with your assistant rather than sending everything to you when you have a concern that something will get dropped when that happens. So then the second half of this is, okay, well, if I've named a person as an agent of the buyer or as an agent of the seller in the purchase and sale agreement, and by the way, you don't have enough space on the face of Form 21 to name everybody, so you might have to add an addendum to create additional space to name those additional agents. The addendum you would use, I believe it's Form 42A, but there is a statewide form specifically for that purpose. You'll find it in the statewide form system. The other half of this is, well, if I'm going to name them as an agent of the consumer in the purchase and sale agreement, then they have to be made an agent of the consumer, and that is also true. So if you have somebody who is a licensed real estate broker who's going to be named as an agent of a party in the purchase and sale agreement, make sure that person is also named as an agent of that consumer in your firm's services agreement, brokerage services agreement with that consumer. So if it's a listing agreement, then you might need to use a form 18, amend your listing agreement to add the name of that additional agent. If you are working with a buyer, so you have a Form 41 buyer brokerage services agreement, then you could use a Form 41A to amend that agreement and name any other broker as an agent of the buyer. If you have questions on this topic or any other, again, refer to the article, but you're always welcome to send me a question, warealtor.org. Follow the links to the legal hotline. Thank you for being a Washington REALTORS member.